Good morning and welcome to Legacy Club's legal series. It's good to be back behind the desk. We've been doing a lot of in-person events over the last few months and long may that continue. My name's Chris. I am the founder of Legacy Club for anybody that hasn't been to a Legacy Club online or in-person event before. Today we're going to be looking at the most common pitfalls that entrepreneurs and founders are facing when scaling up. And this is specifically from a legal perspective. We're joined today by Legacy Club's legal partners, Seven Legal, and their founder, Bill. Good morning, Bill. Welcome. Thank you again.
Morning, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
As you will see, we've got Bill in a suit. For those of you who have met Bill before, he doesn't often wear a suit, so he asked me once where I got that picture from. He was astounded that picture even existed. But you'll just see Bill's head at the moment. So Bill's having some technical issues, but that's not going to stop us powering through, as your PDF quite rightly says. So we're going to crack on, and I know people are going to be dropping in and out as we go through this over the next sort of 45 minutes. But it's a real valuable insight into what entrepreneurs are facing and the pitfalls that they're looking at as they scale the business from a legal perspective. So we do a series of events with Bill throughout the year, and going forward now we can meet in person. We're going to be doing a surgery. So we're going to have an opportunity for members to come and connect with Bill in person and discuss any challenges that you're facing from a legal perspective. So do look out for that. Bill will share his Calendly diary in the chat, but please do put any questions you have in the chat, raise a hand, or ask any questions you might have in regards to your business or just generally in regards to legal, and we will get them answered by Bill. But I'm going to hand over to you, Bill. Enough from me, and let you go through your presentation. Thank you again for joining us.
Brilliant, Chris. Thanks so much. And as I said before, we're delighted to be partners with Legacy Club. We really love the work you're doing. For anyone who's not a member already, I'd really encourage you to get involved, get along to the events. They're really good fun. It's a great network of people there. I think, as we all know, running businesses can actually be quite a lonely endeavor. You're obviously fronting up to everyone saying, hey, everything's great. Everything is great. It's a great opportunity to network, do some peer-to-peer networking, and have a support system there, which is just incredibly important. So Chris, we're loving everything that you're doing, and delighted to be here today. So I'll just do a format of today, very quick intro about ourselves, and hopefully why we're a breath of fresh air in the legal industry. As Chris mentioned there, I'm not usually seen in a suit, and I think that comes across in both how we work and the clients we work with as well. After that, then we'll run through the 10 most common pitfalls. The way we structured it was hopefully providing both, areas to avoid, i.e. those pitfalls, but also, pragmatic solutions that you can implement as well. I think some of Chris were laughing previously that a lot of lawyers market on fear. That's not something that we do. We really try to focus on solutions and, being a strategic partner and asset in your business rather than a fear-mongering lawyer, as some could tend to be. Who we are, we're a team of senior ex-city lawyers. Everyone's worked in either large Magic Silver Circle law firms or in-house practices. We've effectively taken that legal talent, taken it out of a high-cost center in the scope of traditional law firms, and put that in a very remote-first and lean operating model. What that allows us to do is pass on that value in terms of reduced and more accessible fees. And also gives the ability for us to give certainty on costs. So that can be in the form of fixed fees for any pieces of ad hoc work we're doing, and retainers as well for kind of ongoing strategic alignment as well with clients. And also, we always say grown-up conversations, right? If we have the flexibility of kind of running this operation ourselves, that we can have a really good control on costs as well. Fundamentally, what we are is here for the journey. We've worked with clients go from their kind of, first raise of 100K right up to Series B and exits. So we're very much kind of cradle to grave and take a view on that with our clients as well. So what we can do for you, I like to say we can get you money, we can protect your assets, and we can help you hire, fire, or incentivize. That should be incentivized there, not incentives. And what that means is, we're very good at funding rounds. We typically kind of come in at the point that companies are raising kind of $500,000 upwards. So you're kind of into that kind of institutional level stage investment. We help with exits, i.e. when you've kind of reached that, putting money back in your pocket at the point of exit. And then when you've raised cash initially, we help you protect your assets. And that's typically in the form of commercial contracts, website terms and conditions, SaaS agreements, your data protection, and your IP as well. So we do trademarks registration as well. And then the next thing that you're typically spending money on in a business is your people, which are incredibly important to the success of any business. So we'll help with hiring, your contracts, hiring in terms of making sure that you're fully protected if you do need to let people go, your policies along the way, and also your incentives, i.e. your equity, your option pools, and EMI schemes as well. So the way we look at that is it's more or less the life journey of any company that's kind of in that growing and scaling stage, and we can assist with all of that. At the end of that, what do we deliver? Legal happiness is what I like to say. What you're coupling there is expert execution within your business. You can rely on the kind of robust advice of people who've been there, done that, and also understand the entrepreneurial journey. We give you certainty on costs and give you peace of mind, ultimately, which I think, everyone running a business is ultimately reaching for, is that, all right, we know that our legals are sorted. We know that that's under control, and we can crack on and grow the business. So that's a bit about us. As Chris said, please do reach out at any point. My Calendly's there and LinkedIn, and we'll be doing continual workshops with members as well. So the workshop today. So as I said, we're going to talk about the 10 pitfalls to avoid when scaling. So this is really geared to the point where you are at that scale stage, or that that growth stage. Maybe you're kind of going from 2 to 5 employees to 5 to 50. You're kind of being dragged in a lot of different directions, be that towards investors, towards your people, towards everything really on that growth phase. So these are things that we kind of kept in mind, and things that we see consistently, which we feel that can be, addressed quite simply. And as I said, we've included some of the solutions on the way. So the first thing we see quite a lot of is, at the point of raising or at the point of exit, the inevitable due diligence questions come about. And due diligence is where you're really opening up your house to either an investor or prospective purchaser to come in, kick the tires on the business, and really kind of dig into the detail. Now, in an M&A, like this will be across a few different areas. It'll be across financial, legal, commercial, technical, if you've got tech on. So all of a sudden you've got a bunch of external advisors crawling all over your business. And it is quite labor intense. One thing that we see quite a lot is that when these kind of DD requests come in, the company and the management team are scrambling around trying to collect, contracts that have been signed, agreements that have been stored elsewhere. You're kind of trying to chase down employees who might have left. And this creates a lot of distraction at quite a key point of the negotiation, where you as principals should be concentrating on that negotiating point, getting the best deal that you can, and not dealing with kind of administrative disorganization, I would say. And this is always something to be aware of. If you are, what we kind of recommend is you get a DD room set up early. Just take a look at a DD questionnaire, which we can circulate after this, to get an understanding of what this process will look like, how much information is involved, and how you can be storing this information as you're collecting it in your day-to-day operations. So you're almost 90% of the way there when that due diligence comes around. Like I said, we've got a guide that will circulate alongside a folder hierarchy that's set up with that guide, so you can just be storing your documents along the way. That leads to a much smoother DD process and a much kind of slicker experience for the investor and the acquirer, who's naturally looking at your business and being like, hey, should we give these guys money? Should we buy them? It's really about kind of creating that kind of slick experience. So we always say, look, always be ready to raise and always be ready to sell. It's a good state of mind to be in, and it focuses the business as well. So, and both M&A and fundraising follow similar processes in terms of due diligence. Fundraising at an early stage would be a lot lighter touch. At the point of acquisition, it's going to be quite intense. But, these are good processes to put in place early. And a kind of a general note just on exits, if you're at a late seed Series A stage, we saw some statistics recently that up until the last couple of years, 65% of UK technology companies actually exit prior to Series C. So that's kind of just beyond a Series B, obviously, sorry. And, if you're sitting there at a kind of a seed Series A stage, that can be kind of 18 to 24 months out from an exit process. So, you're actually in the shop window a lot earlier than you think, and you're being tracked as a company a lot earlier than you think. With the advent of, there's so many now tech platforms, things like Bohurst, Deal Room, that are publishing a lot of data in terms of companies that are raising. So that immediately puts you into CRM systems, in investors, in M&A houses, in corporate finance houses, and you're in the shop window a lot earlier than you'd expect. So, just that's something to bear in mind, that if you are an exit-focused business, you kind of need to be started thinking about that from, day one or, day two, shall we say. So again, avoid that due diligence panic by kind of having your folder hierarchy set up and understanding what a due diligence process is like. The second thing that we see a lot is co-sec disasters. Now, what I mean by that is just not having your company's books in order, your share registers, your share certificates, your company's house filings. And, initially this seems like a kind of an afterthought and an admin task. When you get to due diligence, both with investors and at an exit point, this becomes of critical importance, because your share registers are effectively the ownership, proof of ownership of who owns the company and who owns shares in your company. So we see this a lot when, at that kind of first institutional round, where it kind of comes out that, these shares have been, promised as such and such, but we never issued the shares. We actually had a company come to us 2 weeks ago. They were in the midst of closing their round, and they said, look, we've completely effed this up. Here's our cap table. The investors won't touch us until we sort all this out. Can you guys fix this? So fortunately, we were able to do so. We kind of got in there. It took, it delayed completion, because ultimately, you then need to kind of go around all your shareholders, make sure that everyone's signed the right documents, make sure that everything's recorded at company's house correctly. And it's all kind of backfilling all this. Again, it's not a great position to be in with new investors, where they're like, look, this is basic admin stuff. Why don't you guys have this under control? Doesn't lead to great conversations, and it is easily avoided. So what we would recommend is there's a couple of products out there that we use internally. We use Inform Direct, really good platform. I think it's partly free to use initially if you've kind of got one or two companies on it. Informdirect.co.uk. We're not paid to tell everyone about this, but we just think it's a great product. And like I said, we use it ourselves. If you kind of come to us and say, hey, can you manage our books? We'll say absolutely. But to be completely transparent, we'll be using Inform Direct. So, it's really up to the matter yourselves if you want to run it yourselves, or we can do that. As things get more complicated, there are other platforms out there like CapDesk, who manage your cap table in a more, I'd say for the kind of more complex cap tables and share registers, you kind of graduate, I would say, onto CapDesk. But, two good platforms there that are, very usable. And again, just takes this off your plate. So you can kind of crack on with running the business, knowing that this is all under control. And again, like in terms of sources who should be advising you, the kind of company's house filings and stuff kind of falls in between the lawyers and accountants. So, whoever you are appointing or entrusting to do this, just make sure that they're on it. We've seen it happen before where it just kind of falls between the cracks. That, the founders don't really take it on, the lawyers kind of give the instructions, and then the accountants don't really do it either. And it's just like, look, get your arms around it. As a director of the company, it's actually, a fiduciary responsibility as well of the management team to make sure this happens. So, just get your arms around it and get it taken care of. And avoid those co-sec disasters. Next one is founder fallouts. Here we see, we're into now the end of the year, which kind of from October onwards is typically what I call founder fallout season. It's when the phone starts ringing from different teams saying, hey, we don't have a shareholder agreement in place, but I'd like to leave. Or, hey, my co-founder is kind of not really pulling his weight or her weight. What's our position here? This is a really, it's a common, I think it's like probably one of the most common reasons why companies fail. And a lot of this is down to, I feel, just not sitting down with your co-founder saying, hey, what is an ideal exit for us both personally and from the company side? What's our North Star that we're driving towards? Do we have initially a founder or shareholders agreement amongst ourselves that we are committing to what we're doing in the business day to day, where we're driving it forward, and also what is the dilution that we're going to face over the course of that journey. It's a really important point just to sit down, map this out on a cap table, assume a couple of raises, assume some dilution from option pools, and just, have a clear plan there with a clearly mapped out cap table and also a clearly mapped out, shareholders agreement amongst management team. It's of critical importance, and, it'll force you to have those awkward conversations that at an early stage you may not want, or you may not want to think about. But, having those conversations up front, having a game plan, it's incredibly important. And as I said, when everyone has clear KPIs, it's very clear then when people aren't delivering. So that, the conversations with your co-founders, if they're not performing, are much easier. There's not kind of white space that people can kind of create their own narrative. It's, look, it's recorded, it's on, we've got a cap table, we've got a shareholders agreement that clearly sets out what we're meant to be doing. And, it frames the conversation in much better terms. So yeah, if you can not fall out with your co-founder, it's a good idea. The next one, what I say is, teams being like Oprah with the equity, i.e., you get shares, you get shares, you get shares, at the outset. And, as you go through the business, I'd like to say, just be greedy with your equity. Don't be giving it away easily. Understand that if you are a technology company and you are going to be scaling, if you are taking on investment, you are taking on dilution. But, really consider how much equity do we need? How much equity do we need at this stage to get us to a higher valuation, at which point we can take on, more capital for less dilution? Again, that kind of comes into the cap table model that we mentioned on the previous slide. It's just looking at where's the exit and then working backwards from that. In terms of avoiding dilution, there's a lot of non-diluting source of funding out there. If you're a knowledge intensive business or a business that grants are available from, huge amounts out there. There's a lot of companies now that'll go out and source. One of our clients is Swoop Finance. What they do is they've kind of mapped out a lot of different sources of equity. As an SME business, you can go on there, upload your details, and they'll match you with either grant funding, debt products, equity products. So they're doing a really good job of that both across the UK and Ireland. So don't automatically think that you need to be giving away your company to fund it. There's a lot of different sources out there at the moment. We all know globally the money printing machines are still whirring. So, looking for those sources of non-diluting funding is time well spent, I would say. And making sure that the next thing is, when you are giving away equity, make sure what you're getting in return, and that you've geared, how you're giving away that equity towards the deliverables and the incentives that you want to achieve. And what I mean by that is, okay, if you're giving away cash, or if you're giving away equity, make sure that you're getting as much cash as you need. If you're giving away equity to employees, make sure that that's structured in such a way that it's vested over time, so you are getting the increased loyalty that you're looking for there from your team. And if people are coming to you saying, hey, we can do XYZ for some equity, or kind of giving vague promises of we've got big networks, or just give us a bit of your company, be very specific in terms of what exactly is being delivered here, and what are we getting away, because ultimately you are giving away what should be very valuable equity at the end of your journey. And it's easy when you do become diluted to lose motivation, right, as you go along. So be incredibly protective over it. And the question always is, all right, before we are going into this deal, or giving away this equity, what happens if it goes wrong? And just have those conversations. How do we get that back? Can we claw it back? Are we giving it out by options rather than awarding that equity? And how are we hedging ourselves here for things that don't work out? Again, just thinking through that and structuring your investment documents, your equity awards with employees, and any third-party advisors or joint venture partners correctly is critically important. So to summarize, if you're giving away equity, be clear on what you're getting in return, and be clear what happens if it doesn't work out as well. So next thing will be is, as I mentioned, kind of being thrifty on the legals. And what I don't mean here is wasting a lot of cash on overcomplicated advice, particularly at the kind of early stage and the outset of the business. The focus needs to be on, okay, strategically, what do I need in place within my business to make this work? And how are we ensuring that that is being delivered, via our legal contracts, be that investment, our commercial contracts, our employment contracts, our consultancy agreements. And really working with people who understand the business, understand where you're going, and having quite, I would say, frank conversations with your lawyers. I think the ideal position to be working with lawyers is that they're strategic advisors to your business. If they're the right team, and I say legals here, but the same thing extends to accountants, to tax advisors, to any advisors really in your business. Make sure that they're in there for the journey, that they are offering you, at times there's services that have to be delivered, i.e. outputs like legal documentation, but also explore what their network is like. Who else are they advising? Are there businesses that they can introduce you to? Most advisors are great sources of referrals. And, if you can develop relationships long-term, they stand the test of time. And in terms of, keeping a lid on your costs, again, you can spread this out over a year or 12 months of saying, hey, look, here's the game plan of where we want to get to by the end of the year. What are the steps that we need to do so? Here's the scope of work. Let's spread that cost over 12 months. Then that gives you certainty in terms of your cash flow, but also certainty and peace of mind that all your legals are being dealt with over time. Similar to the way you put it, accountants. You agree a work scope and put it out there as well. And like I said, your lawyers and your advisors should be assets within your business. I think where people get turned off is when legal advice becomes a very lumpy expenditure, and it's a very ad hoc negative approach and relationship. So, ultimately, like we say quite a lot, is you will ultimately end up paying for legal advice. It's not a nice to have. It is an essential in your business. So making sure that you're working with the right partners and at the right stage is of critical importance. So that, as I said, that's applicable to accountants and every other advisor across your business as well. So the next pitfall to avoid would be losing control of your ability to raise. Particularly in businesses, if you're going to need a couple of rounds of funding and that funding is effectively going to be existential to your business, i.e. if you don't get it, the whole thing is going to fold, then you should push back extremely strongly on any restrictions on you raising that capital. This is initially, I think most investors will try to put a complete control over a company raising. It's one of the biggest points that we really push back strongly on for any of our clients. We say, look, as an investor, you should have the ability to participate in subsequent rounds, i.e., you're not going to be cut out of a round of investment. But if you don't wish to participate in the company raising, then there's no commercial rationale or very little commercial rationale for you having a veto over the company going out and raising. It doesn't make sense. And like I said, on one side, you've got a company that can go bust, and on the other side, you've got investors that are saying we may not want to invest. So it doesn't make sense at all. So the way, where we would put in kind of restrictions around is say, okay, you can't do a down round. You need consent to raise at a lower valuation than your previous raise. But other than that, the restrictions should be minimal. And where you ultimately want to, retain control there is you say, hey, look, our shareholder base will be given the opportunity to invest. If they choose not to, then it falls back on the board to elect what investors are coming in at each round. So pro rata entitlement is fine. After pro rata entitlement, the board should control who is raising in subsequent rounds. So again, maintaining control of your raising, maintaining where you can access capital, really critical importance there. So avoid losing that control. And following on from that point, losing control of your exit. So where we again, negotiate very hard on with this for our clients is ultimately, from a founder perspective, from an entrepreneur perspective, you want to be able to raise more money and you want to eventually get an exit. Is most people's path in a high growth business. There are, and I'm talking about companies that are typically kind of raising onwards in rounds. So what you want to maintain here is, the ability that if someone comes along and says, hey, here's a life-changing amount of money, you want to be able to jump on that if you feel that is the best deal that you can achieve, and that is the right move for you and the business at that time. So any restrictions in terms of funding round, in terms of exits, you want to be very mindful of. And typically what you want to structure there is that you have, drag along rights in order to be able to drag the minority of shareholders. Where investors get a bit nervous about this would be, say, if they're investing and the company sells out at a very low valuation. So if they kind of came in at 4 million pre-money and the company is valued at 5 million post-money, and then someone comes in the next day and says, hey, we'll buy the company for 5 million. Obviously, investors are taking a lot of risk there, but not get any reward because they're exiting even. Whereas the founding team or whoever has the other 80% have just got 4 million quid in their pockets. So, they're happy, investors not so happy. So, the way to balance that on both sides is to say, okay, look, there can be a veto over an exit prior to a certain valuation being hit. So, okay, we get the ability to force a sale at, say, 2x the investor's investment, 1.5, 2x, 3x, whatever that number is agreed on. So, that incentivizes everyone to drive towards an exit. And again, puts control of that exit process in management's hands. So again, it's something to be aware of. Also, when you're considering, taking on investment, a big thing that we see and consistently is when you're taking on strategic investors, i.e., maybe an investor from industry or a potential a trade partner. No matter what, if they're not a pure play investor, typically they're investing early to buy the company outright at a later date, which in theory sounds great. In practice, what it can do is stifle the ability of the management team to create competitive tension at the point of exit, i.e. to get a number of buyers in a process, ratchet up the price as much as possible because they're competing with each other, and get as big a return as possible for management and for the company. If you've got a strategic investor who's invested early and then has said, okay, well, we want a right of first refusal over the company at the end, in practice, no potential acquirer is going to enter into due diligence, enter into a competitive process, because they know that really what you're doing there is just trying to price the company, and say, they'll just say, well, look, this giant corporation or this big strategic investor that you've got on your cap table is just going to buy the company anyway, so we're not even going to enter into the process. At which point, you don't have much bargaining power with your strategic investor. So anything that puts a dampener on your ability to exit and create competitive tension during that exit should be pushed back on very, very strongly. So that's it. So maintaining that kind of control and competitive tension is of critical importance. Again, if you are driving the business towards an exit, this is not relevant if you are, creating a highly cash flow generative business that you want to build steadily and grow over the long term. It's kind of a different model. So filling the wrong seats, this kind of comes into employment law and advice. What we say kind of quite a lot, particularly in fast scaling businesses, is that people hire early on and obviously need to replace teams as they scale and grow. What is a head of appointment at an early stage is a very different head of appointment when you kind of get to Series B, C, and D. So, handing out titles and equity packages earlier on, you need to be very mindful there of what is the game plan for the business. Kind of coming back to that exit conversation that you've had early doors and the kind of game plan that you're setting out. Be looking at it and saying, hey, look, maybe we need instead of a head of growth here, we need a growth specialist who may grow into that head of growth role as we scale, but they may also not do so. So handing out titles and equity packages as well early, you need to really be mindful of is this the individual that's going to take us right through to exit, or are they likely to be replaced? If they are likely to be replaced, or we're likely going to have to incentivize a more senior hire with equity at a later date. Just be very mindful of handing out that equity early, because ultimately you don't want your entire option pool giving away at a very early stage and then not being able to incentivize senior hires as the business grows. So, really important just to be aware. And, we see it a lot. We see, kind of relatively junior employees sitting on a lot of equity just because they kind of got in early. It's just something to be very, very mindful. Again, kind of going back to being greedy with your equity, making sure that those packages are in line with market and with the role that's being filled. And again, and that goes for board seats as well. things move and change as the companies develop. So, it all needs to be under reviewed constantly. And again, that kind of comes into your employment agreements, your EMI schemes, and your option awards. Not protecting your IP, again, it can be somewhat of an afterthought at times. We've kind of had a situation recently where a client has come to us and said, hey, we've just got this letter in from a pretty massive competitor. They are coming after us for trademark infringement. Really, really great business, e-com play. They're kind of, they ramped up very quickly over lockdown. We're kind of doing, I think, 200K a month MRR from a standing start. And all of a sudden they've got this letter in saying, hey, we're coming after you and your business, which has actually, forced the management team into looking at, what an exit scenario looks like very quickly, way ahead of where they thought they were. But, as soon as they heard that they were infringing on someone's IP and the company were kind of coming after them aggressively, it's almost forced them into a negotiating position that they didn't want to be in at this stage. And they're currently working through that. So, looking across your business, looking at, where can we register IP in terms of trademarks and patents, if that is available, making sure that you've got them in place, getting that strategic IP advice. And then looking at your, making sure that you have your contractual protections in place, i.e. confidentiality clauses across all your commercial contracts, your employment contracts, and your consulting contracts. One big point that always comes up in due diligence is making sure that anyone who has worked on your business, particularly, creating any IP, that they have IP assignment clauses in their contracts, in their employment agreements, in their consulting agreements as well. Critical importance, because investors will be looking for that, and it's something that investors and any acquirers will look at very closely. Just fundamentally putting in operational protections. I always say, legal agreements are great, but you need to enforce them. Whatever you can do to protect things at an operational level and avoid getting into a legal argument is the best advice that you can get, right? Fundamentally, if you can sign an NDA and give people confidential information, or you could just not give them that confidential information in the first place. So be very mindful of kind of the information that you're sharing, if it is of, a proprietary nature or is highly sensitive, i.e. trade secrets or, real operational insights within your business. Just be very, very mindful of that. Then what I'd say here is not all gray hair is equal. What that means really is making sure that your board and your senior advisors have relevant experience for the stage that you're at. And it's something that we reiterate to our clients, is making sure to get stage specific advice, i.e. We had an investor, actually, or kind of a co-founder / investor, come to us recently and say, hey, we got ourselves in a bit of bother here. We put money into a business with a guy who's super senior in the kind of retail space. What we realized was he was so senior, he couldn't open a shop, and that's what we kind of brought him in to do. So, again, making sure that anyone who's on your board, who you're paying for advice or taking advice from, understands exactly where the business is and can add value at your stage. And that value can come in very different ways. Operational experience, network, extended network, seeking investment, general strategic advice. That these are all things that are critically important and what you should be asking for from your board. But just remember that someone who may be able to give you great advice at seed through Series B, like ourselves, we'd be very good in that space. Once you get beyond Series B, we're probably not going to be much use to you, and we'd transition you off into kind of larger law firms at that stage. Or if you're going internationally, again, that would be something that we'd say, hey, look, we'll connect you with other people and your business. Same way, people on your board will have the same experience. So, it may be that, you as a management team decide that actually, we're not actually getting that much value here. Or in a lot of instances, it may be the incoming investors turn around and say, hey, look, to actually drive this business forward, we feel that you need, a different set of skills than you have in that board. So it's happening. One of our clients at the moment, they're taking on investment from a very large multinational. One of their kind of scorecard metrics of rating a business is, the makeup of the board. And so they're now on the hunt for a very strategic but also hands-on chairman who's going to really work with the CEO and drive the business forward through its next stages of growth. So again, just be reviewing everything across your business, your advisors, your board, your team at each stage of growth, because each stage requires different skill sets and different needs in the business. And I believe that is all 10 of us. Like I said, thanks so much. Happy to open it up to questions, Chris, if anyone's still there. I think we may have lost Chris temporarily. Guys, I can see the chat if anyone wants to pop questions in. Happy to answer them there. Inform Direct, Chris, thanks for throwing that up. Really useful platform if you're maintaining companies or even a portfolio of companies. It's really good. Come back, Chris.
Can you hear me, Bill?
Yeah.
I kept losing connection there, so apologies everybody. It kept dropping in and out. I missed your finale there, Bill. But thank you so much again for all the support you give Legacy Club. As I said at the beginning, Bill has put his details, or I have put Bill's details in the chat. Please do connect with Bill. Set up a no obligation, completely complimentary and confidential meeting with Bill about your legal challenges for scaling up. It's all part of the Legacy Club package, and you can do that in person at one of our venues, or you can do that with Bill. Thank you again. If there are any questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat or contact Bill directly. We have lots of events coming up. Not everything has been announced yet. We do have some really, really secret, brilliant panelists and discussions coming up in person. We've also got dinner with Levi Roots, which is sold out, which I'm immensely proud and pleased to be doing. But we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Breakfast Club, I can announce, will be back on the 7th of December in the very trendy East London, which details will be announced very soon about that too. So please feel free to connect to Legacy Club in any way and to me directly. And thank you again, Bill, for all of the service for Legacy.
Good. Thanks so much, Chris.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.